Start all over again.
अभी तुम्हारा स्क्रीन नहीं issue तुम्हारा face का issue।
So apologies, we start all over again. Good evening to everyone. So we are here because of a very important event that happened last week. The Prime Minister of India went for a momentous United States visit, and a lot of people have said that what's the big deal about this visit? It happens almost on a every 2-3 years. Whoever has been the Prime Minister in the past, they also went. So what's fundamentally different about this visit? To discuss about that issue, we have a very esteemed guest today, Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee. I'll give a little background about her, but before that, let's have a bit of understanding of why this visit is so very important. In 2013, Morgan Stanley came out with a report. So I'll try to speak both in English and Hindi so that everybody is comfortable with it. 2013 में एक रिपोर्ट लाया था मॉर्गन स्टैनली, उसमें इंडिया को दे टर्म्ड इंडिया एज वन ऑफ द फ्रेजाइल 5 इकोनॉमीज. फ्रेजाइल मतलब जो सिस्टेमिकली बहुत मतलब इट्स इन अ वेरी बैड सिचुएशन. From fragile 5 economy of the world to major 5 economies of the world. Can you imagine the transformation Prime Minister has done in 9 years? From fragile 5 to major 5. एंड ऐसा नहीं कि इस 9 साल में सब कुछ बहुत आसान था. वी हैड अ ह्यूज पैंडेमिक टू डील विद. वी हैड अ ह्यूज कॉन्फ्लिक्ट गोइंग ऑन बिटवीन यूक्रेन एंड रशिया, जिसको डी फैक्टो एक नेटो वर्सेस रशिया वॉर भी कहा जाता है, और उसका एक इम्पैक्ट हुआ था इंटरनेशनली इन टर्म्स ऑफ राइज इन प्राइस ऑफ कमोडिटीज. एंड देर आर अदर चैलेंजेस. इंडिया के अंदर बहुत सारे रिफॉर्म्स लाना पड़ा था. सम ऑफ दिस रिफॉर्म्स वर वेरी डिफिकल्ट. People were not happy with these reforms, and we had to deal with all of those issues eventually before we emerged as the 5th largest economy. अगले एक साल में we might eventually become the 4th largest economy of the world, right? And that is the major transformation that Prime Minister has brought in. To discuss why this event was successful, what are the key elements of this event, why this event makes a huge difference so far as India is concerned, we have Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee with us. Ma'am has been a retired diplomat for the last few years. Before that, she had an incredible career. She's an active commentator, as I mentioned, on international affairs across several prominent news channels. She earned her bachelor's degree in history from Miranda College and a master's degree in history from Delhi University. She earned a degree in French language and civilization from the University of Sorbonne in Paris. Ma'am joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1976. She headed the Indian Foreign Ministry's department specializing in European affairs from 1998 to 2004. She piloted institutional initiatives across on issues of Indo-US summits, and she has been into UNESCO. She has been the Chief of Staff to the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner. She lectures in the Foreign Service Institute. Let me tell you one thing. When we talk about fighting for the country, we have the army fighting it out. We have the internal security people fighting it out, such as the police or the paramilitary, or say, I'm sure the IB and the RAW do their own work. When it comes to information warfare, uh, there are people like Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee who have been consistently doing it for the last 1 decade, fighting it out in the whole world of narratives. That is a very important element. To understand that, there was a Sabrina Siddiqui Wall Street Journal reporter suddenly asking a loaded question. A lot of youngsters suddenly would think, "Arey, Wall Street Journal asking must be the right thing." But the hidden agenda behind it is something sinister. And to counter that, consistently fighting for that is something, there's a whole army of people who keep on doing it on a daily basis. It's like, a soldier is never on a holiday. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I can recognize some of my friends and colleagues who are online, I'm very happy that you have a young audience here, because the whole objective, I think, of having these kind of discussions is also to reach out to actually the people who will make India uh, into a truly great power, from an emerging power to a great power. That is India's youth, India's young people. They are our strength. So I'm very happy to be here. We are talking about Prime Minister Modi's path breaking visit and the beginning of a strategic partnership. But I would like to remind you, since I'm much older than my moderator here, that you have to also understand where we have arrived in the India US strategic partnership. In 1971, Nixon used some epithets to describe Indian people and the then Indian Prime Minister, and Kissinger sent the 7th Fleet to bombard Kolkata. But fortunately, we were able to liberate Bangladesh before that happened. That was in 71. This is 2023. Consider not just how much India has changed and moved into the space which India was denied because of partition. Because what was partition finally? But the effort by our colonizer to ensure that India would continuously remain a sub regional power trapped in its neighborhood, surrounded by hostile neighbors, and by its own creation, that's Pakistan. And for a long time, Pakistan was a close ally of the West, of a world divided in the Cold War into alliances, which India refused to join because India did not, as a former colonial power, want to be trapped into alliances for and against. Should I continue or we've gone off the air?
You can continue. Continue,
Okay.
Kichi.
I'm sorry for the interruption. And therefore, I come to the significance of the visit. I would like to say that having served 3 years in New York in the permanent mission from 86 to 89, and having been in New York in the UN General Assembly when Gorbachev made his visit, and there was no place to sit in the UN General Assembly, and I was sitting on a chair without interpretation, and he spoke in Russian, which I don't understand, but I understood the emotion of what Gorbachev was saying. It is particularly significant that our Prime Minister went to New York and then went to Washington. Because what did he do in New York is also a very important part of the visit to the United States. In New York, he demonstrated that India brings a unique blend of soft and hard power. That India's cultural and civilizational connect is the answer to a world deeply divided by, for instance, the most important conflict right now, the Russia Ukraine conflict, and other conflicts that have divided the world. Because in his very first term, our Prime Minister ensured that the UN General Assembly would adopt the International Yoga Day. And from then to now, where you have yoga being taught in Saudi Arabia, and where you have a record breaking number of countries who actually sat on a mat and did yoga and yogic postures with our Prime Minister in New York in the UN, is as path breaking as any of the other developments of the visit. So I'd like to begin with that. And what happened after that? What happened was that our Prime Minister is a vegetarian and a teetotaler. What did Prime Minister Biden do? President Biden do? President Biden said, I'm glad we both of us don't drink. And he gave a special Indian thali where there was, fortunately, I suppose, for Bengalis like me, the provision that you can order fish if you wish to. Otherwise, it was completely vegetarian. That was in the state dinner, that was in the private dinner. That's another important, important part of the visit. There was a private dinner followed by a state dinner. That is unprecedented in diplomatic protocol. He also addressed the, the two houses for the second time. And that brings him in the very distinguished company of just 2 or 3 heads of state and government who have done so. And what he said in that address uh, to the two houses is also signifies how much India and the India-US strategic partnership has come of age under Prime Minister Modi. What did he say? How did he begin? He said, standing here 7 Junes ago, I said that the hesitations of history were behind us. Beautifully said. What does it mean? It means that 7 years ago, our Prime Minister told the joint houses that the India US partnership is coming of age. Today, 7 years later, he said, it has come of age, and he talked about the America India Connect as AI. And the very next day, President Biden presented him with a t shirt with AI, not artificial intelligence, but the America India Connect. Sometimes, in a partnership, such symbolic gestures are as important as the substance itself. So I'm first beginning with the symbolic gestures before going into the substance. He also talked about democracy and what binds us together. And that was extremely important considering that, unfortunately, one former president decided to make some unfortunate remarks, which have been countered yesterday by the White House statesman saying that that gentleman is a private citizen and his remarks are not supported by either the State Department or the White House. He also then spoke about the transformation of India from his first to second term, from his first visit to his second visit. And that was also very important because he made Americans understand. Because a lot of Americans, because their country is very large, and actually Americans don't travel much. I can tell you that because I've lived in New York for 3 years. They're not like Europeans or Asians who like to travel. They are pretty comfortable in their own country. It's very important to understand that Americans, many of them, don't know much about India. But now they do. Why? Because of the connect, because of the soft power, because of the diaspora, which is playing an extremely important role as a bridge between India and the United States. And what is that diaspora doing in contrast to other diaspora? That diaspora is seamlessly connected within American prosperity and is seamlessly connected to India. That diaspora is today having important and key leadership positions, whether it's the World Bank or all those hedge fund managers or California. You don't need me to tell you. You're young people. You know all the names better than me. But what do all those names mean to us? It means that our diaspora is actually, in a way, also pushing that partnership, making America and Americans understand how important India is for the future prosperity and strategic stability of the United States. It is also very important to understand that despite all the efforts made, unfortunate efforts made, to create a negative narrative before the visit by both people within India and outside India, that did not work. Why? Because cutting across the party divide in the United States, the Republicans and the Democrats understand very clearly that India represents a pillar of stability in a highly conflicted world, and that the future prosperity of the globe depends on that huge Indian market. And to do that, it is very important to ensure the connect between the West and Asia through the Indo-Pacific, which is today the region where all the trade routes flow. And who is the greatest challenger for the prosperity of and stability of the Indo-Pacific? That is India's largest neighbor, China, who actually has invented a unique method of troubling us. From time to time, the Chinese do what is called salami slicing of our territory, or try to do. It hasn't worked under Prime Minister Modi. But salami slicing of India's territory means that China, as a P5 country, as a great power in her own right, as a country that has settled its borders with all other neighbors except India, has deliberately kept the border issue open because it shares the old doctrine of keeping India trapped as a sub regional power, trapped within its neighborhood, trapped trying to defend its frontiers, and helped by its ally, Pakistan. But it hasn't quite worked the way that the Chinese wanted, because what have we done? We have actually in this visit managed to go forward on a lot of issues that we need to secure our frontiers and to make us a stronger power to counter threats on our borders and to counter emerging threats that could happen, whether it's in the Indo Pacific or the South China Sea or on our far flung islands. To secure the security of the oceans is also an important strategic priority of India under this Prime Minister and this government. So, when people talk about the fact that we are going to manufacture General Electric's GE F414 jet engine, which will be produced at Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, I want you to understand that this is a game changer. Why? Because the only other countries so far capable of producing their own jet engines are United States, Russia, UK, and France. Where does that bring us? It brings us into a new P5, right? The P5 of jet producing engines. It makes the world understand how ludicrous it is to make India sit outside the Security Council. How ludicrous. And slowly, we are getting into the big game. We are buying Predator armed drones from General Atomics. We had hired a few when we had the first problem in, in 2020 at the height of Chinese aggression. These Predator armed drones are a very essential part of our defending our territory effectively and ensuring that we are not taken by surprise. We've also launched an initiative on critical and emerging technologies. This is extremely important because United States now has no hesitation in sharing with India its closest strategic partner, which is not a NATO partner. India is not a member of NATO. Normally, the United States would not share such critical technology with a non-NATO country. An exception has been made. Why? Because United States understands that the stronger India is militarily and in its defense capabilities, the greater the challenges to international peace and security diminish, and the greater is the importance of this strategic partnership, because India, positioned where it is, can actually be a crucial factor in ensuring the balance of power, which is being sought to be disturbed by an aggressive China allied with a bankrupt Pakistan. There are also other takeaways from the visit which are equally important. But I don't want to go into that right now. I want you to all to understand that a lot was said when the Ukraine-Russia conflict broke out, that how can India manage this? Actually, what our Prime Minister said in the beginning said it all. When he said that this is not an era of war. But moreover, he was also able to make both sides understand that India does not support armed conflict to change frontiers, nor does India appreciate a conflict that can destroy the emerging global recovery from the pandemic. But what have we done? Faced with unilateral Western sanctions on Russia, we have managed prosperity for our people without breaking a single sanction, either of the West, of the Americans, or the European Union. We have managed the crisis in a manner in which the United States understands very clearly that we really have no other option, being a democracy, but to first ensure that India comes first, just like in United States, as Trump was very fond of saying, America comes first. In any democracy, the country's national interest comes first. The country's prosperity comes first. So when Prime Minister Modi gave his famous address, he he said something again which is extremely important. He said, we are the only G20 country to meet our Paris commitment. What he didn't say was that when climate change was first discussed, developing and emerging countries were supposed to be funded to help to make those important transformations, because the whole climate change crisis was not created by them but by the developed countries. But despite any assistance, our Prime Minister has said that we have met our Paris commitment. And that again puts us in a different league, like the league which produces its own jet engines. These are all very, very important uh, actions which speak of how important India has become in the strategic partnership with the United States. And then again, when he said that India believes in Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, he was also in a way referring to conflicts. If the world is one family, then conflicts are irrelevant. They have to be sorted. And when he concluded, and that again is very important, because just like yoga and soft power and the civilizational connect, India brings with it the light of the sun to drive away the evil powers of darkness. And when he concluded his speech, he quoted the young American poet Amanda Gorman, who said, and he quoted it, when day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if only we are brave enough to see it. Which is why, in all our scriptures, we always talk about the significance of the dawn, of the rise of the sun. And what did Prime Minister Modi say indeed? Clearly, the way I interpret it is India's rise, inexorable rise. From the dawn, we are rising. Nobody can push us back. Just like you cannot push back a sun that is rising, it will only continue rising. And that sun's trajectory is linked with America's trajectory, making it the most significant strategic partnership of the century. And I would like to take questions and answers, but I'd like to end by actually quoting, because my friends in the Foreign Service say that I am very francophone, but I am quite francophone actually. But I'll say this in English and not in French because you won't understand otherwise. That it was Victor Hugo who said, "You can resist an invading army, but you cannot resist an idea whose time has come." And I would therefore say that the India US partnership's time has come, like the rising sun that Prime Minister Modi said. And therefore, American strategic needs and perspectives finally correspond with India. Finally, we have left behind the shadow of 71, the fleet that would come and bombard Kolkata harbour, the misunderstandings of the past which are behind us, gone with the strong blaze of the rising sun. India's time has come, and so has the India US partnership. So I will end here and take questions.
Yeah,
I hope
so
I'm
I'll
not
just, before I throw open the for questions, so let me just add where ma'am has concluded. She has beautifully explained. Three, four things I wanted to mention on behalf of the foundation. We have deepened our friendship with United States even while defying US on several occasions. We have not compromised like many of the, with all due respect, like many of the Western European countries, to deepen our friendship with US. US ने कहा तेल मत खरीदो. We said we will buy oil in Indian interest. Remember what Mr. Jaishankar said, that we buy as much oil in 1 month as you buy in 1 afternoon. He said that आपके देशों में per capita income $60,000 है per month, per capita per year. हमारे देश में $2,000 है. If you can think about your own interest, why shouldn't we? So we did not compromise on energy security. We dealt with the COVID situation without buying or importing any vaccine. We are buying drones, true. But let me give you a data. In the last 3 years, Indian Army acquired 2,000 drones, mostly, almost 90% of them made in India. There are certain gaps in technology we still have. जो हमने खरीदा, it's called high altitude long endurance drones. We are already making something called Tapas, which is a medium altitude drone. We are making Ghatak, we are making, there are a few others, and a large number of other different kinds of loitering munitions. सब India से खरीदा गया. So on defense, on pharma, on energy, and on de-dollarization, we are making rupee and international currency for trade. Let me tell you, these 4 things globally run the global economy. And the West is a very, very big player in that. They don't like competition. So when you emerge as a competitor for the West and still make West embrace you, that is where diplomacy comes. And that is where, from the Prime Minister's office to the Ministry of External Affairs to every diplomat who is working silently, we must applaud all of them. To make West your friend, even when you defy the West, it's a great, great achievement. And it's not easy. It hasn't happened in one day. It took a lot of time to make them understand. And ironically today, the Russian oil gets refined in India, and then it is exported to the same Europe, which puts sanctions on that Russian oil. So we are one of the largest exporter of refined oil in spite of not being a producer of oil. So we are making money out of a crisis also. And in spite of the challenges, remember another thing, with ma'am's permission I want to add, we became something called Voice of Global South. There was a summit in January, Voice of Global South Summit, where 120 developing countries said that India would be representing us. India is our voice. Why do you think the president of Papua New Guinea touched PM's feet? We gave vaccines to more than 90 odd countries when the West was accused of vaccine hoarding. What the West has to do, we have to do it 10 times more because of our population. And we have been asking for reforms in the multilateral institutions, which again the West doesn't want. We want the United Nations to be more inclusive. We want the UN conflict resolution mechanism to be more effective. We abrogated Article 370. The Prime Minister's office, again the MEA, played a critical role in making the whole world understand. Pakistan said there will be a nuclear war. Nothing happened. That is called management of consequence. Managing a decision. UN was created after 1945 to end conflicts, to prevail peace, to bring peace. Imagine or count the number of wars that happened since 1945 and what has been the role of United Nations in that. In United Nations peacekeeping force goes, if somebody tells them prevent a war, we said we are not here to prevent a war, we are just there to manage the peace if at all there is peace. United Nations peacekeeping force, we know what it does. So when you are asking for multilateral reforms, multilateral institutions to be reformed, which generally has taken care of the West, when you talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, that I want, okay, I'm buying your things, but I want you to make it in India or transfer the technology. We will not have a client-vendor relationship anymore, that you'll keep on exporting and we'll keep on importing. We are not giving up on Atmanirbhar Bharat. There are more than 3,000 such components and finished products. Uska negative list Ministry of Defense ne bana liya, which will either be made in India with collaboration with a foreign vendor or will be sourced from Indian companies only. So when you take strong stands on issues and then you embrace a country with whom you have areas of convergence also. Lot of areas of commonality. United States is a great democracy. We have cultural connect, people to people connect. But nobody wants another competition to come in. So we are today not just a market, but an emerging competitor. And when the West then embrace you, a lot of credit goes, not just what we have done in terms of reforming the economy, the huge critical reforms, जैसे GST. Today, if the world respects India, Prime Minister Modi is being respected. Please understand, the fundamental reason is Indian economy. At a time when economies are collapsing, getting bankrupt, the Indian economy became a $3.75 trillion economy when many had written India off during COVID situation. कैसे उभर के आया? And a lot of times we say, generally that, we question the government, the bureaucracy. Think about the enormous amount of work that has been done by the MEA and other departments in terms of making sure every Indian gets the vaccine, the last mile connectivity, from manufacturing the vaccine to making sure the logistical things are taken care of, to making sure everyone gets it, to giving 80 crore plus people free ration. And then reviving the economy out of nowhere to make it the 5th largest economy. By next year, it will be a $4 trillion economy. Maintaining a almost $600 billion foreign exchange reserve when there's a foreign exchange crisis in so many other countries. And then going out of the way to help other countries, be it Turkey, be it Sri Lanka, be it even Afghanistan, जिसमें अभी भूखमरी चल रही है almost.
We can ask some questions.
Right? And that is where we come from. So this was from the foundation. We had to say this. Now I open the floor for questions.
Can we have the screen on? Or?
Anybody?
They are muted, no?
No, that is not so. यहाँ से आपको.
First question is, how
Okay.
India get bipartisan support from Congress, American Congress?
How will we get, or how did
How
we?
India get bipartisan support from Congress?
Because there is a recognition cutting across the political divide that the India-US strategic partnership is essential for United States immediate, medium-term and long-term strategic priorities. Because both parties understand that whether it is in economics, whether it is in sharing of critical technologies, as we've just heard, or whether it is in jointly, for instance, patrolling the Indo-Pacific, getting together in important bodies like the Quad, present chairmanship of Prime Minister Modi of the G20, etc. These all demonstrate that United States, India can work together for international peace and security, but also for advancing their own critical core national interests on both sides. And so that's why there is a bipartisan recognition of the importance of this partnership. I suggest when you all ask me a question, give your name also because it can get
Yeah,
recorded.
sure. You should give your name, and if you are representing any particular organization, please inform that also.
Myself, Sarvesh Srivastava.
Sure.
I'm doing law from Delhi University.
Thank you. I would like to have some of the ladies ask me some questions.
Yes,
There
sir.
are only 2-3 ladies here.
You can
so
take the mic and then.
Yes, take the mic and tell us.
Hello. I'm Anjali Chaudhary from Faculty of Law, Delhi University. My question is, how can we trust USA? Like in 1971 war, what you have mentioned or what we have all known, the Fifth Fleet sent by USA to help Pakistan. At that time, Russia helped us by sending its Seventh Fleet. Yeah.
Ask me your question.
Okay. So how can we trust USA in this? Like that time it was
The Russians did not send any fleet. We won Bangladesh on our own. We liberated Bangladesh on our own with the Mukti Bahini. What the Russians did for us is that they used the Russian word "niet," which means no, to stop the efforts by United States to censure us in the Security Council. They used the word "niet," no. They blocked it, which is something that any Indian of my generation can never forget. We owe the then USSR a very big debt of gratitude for what they did to us. They had given us a time frame that they cannot say niet more than a certain number of times. I remember it very well because my late father was the Defense Secretary of India at that time. And we were able to liberate Bangladesh with Mukti Bahini during that time. It was the Americans who sent their fleet to intimidate us, but before they could reach, it had reached the Indian Ocean, we had already liberated Bangladesh and the Pakistani army had surrendered. Can we or can we not trust the United States? You have to understand, we come from a land where the greatest political thinker was ours, that is Chanakya. Chanakya said foreign policy is always based on core national interests. In concentric circles, beginning with the closest around you. If the closest concentric circle to you consists of hostile states, you have to go further. A nation cannot either change its history or its geography. That is, in fact, what we have frequently suggested to both the Ukrainians and the Russians privately, that you cannot change your history and your geography. You are linked together. You have to learn to live with each other. But the same is equally true for India. We are surrounded by hostile states. And we have a United States whose strategic priorities finally coincide with India's priorities and core national interests. That is the reason why, although we are a competitor, we have become what is now called in many American media and what The Economist, a traditionally hostile anti-India magazine, said 5 days before Prime Minister Modi's visit. Its front page said, America's new best friend. And I thought, hey, wait a minute, this is very, very interesting coming from The Economist, which is anti-Indian and anti this present government and anti our Prime Minister. But if you read through what Economist said, actually coming from a journal that is viscerally anti-Indian, it actually acknowledged the reality, which is that the India-US connect is of great benefit to United States and the West. And that is precisely why, despite being a competitor, despite having a different perspective, which is normal for a country of our size and our population, United States, much more than the European Union, accepts and acknowledges that those differences are livable. They can be ironed out. What matters is the connect. And so that's why I think it would be foolish for any foreign policy practitioner to say, we trust a strategic partner 100%. Coming from the land of Chanakya, that is impossible. We have to trust our strategic partners to the extent that our strategic priorities continue to coincide. If the coincidence of strategic partnerships start wavering, we have to make an effort to get them together or look for other strategic partners. But for the moment, that is not the case. So yes, my answer to you would be yes, we should trust United States, because clearly what we've got from this visit is a clear commitment to what? The United States has given bipartisan support to the recognition of the McMahon line. The United States is giving us core critical technology. The United States is giving us Predator drones, which we need till we can make our own to protect our borders, especially on the Chinese side. The United States is helping us on semiconductors, again, which is critically needed. And the United States has publicly acknowledged at the level of its president, not once but many times, that this relationship really matters to the United States. So I think, given those circumstances, we should, for the moment, even though we are the land of Chanakya, we should say that yes, this partnership is good for us.
Ma'am, just a continuing question on this. Is it also not true that we have not betting entirely on United States? I mean, we have hedged it against other countries as well. So it's not that we are. Is it also not true that we are not entirely dependent on United States? We are not creating a situation like this. If push comes to a shove, we have other options as well. So can we conclude also
That
that?
is a given in foreign policy, that we have to have uh, other options.
Right.
But I would like to clearly say under this visit, but my personal assessment is that the India US relationship has come of age regardless of who wins the next US presidential elections, okay? And that clearly the American side understands that our first priority is to become a great nation, a great economic power, and with secure frontiers. And if the United States is behind us on both these issues, then I think we can say that it is, for me, in my perspective, it is the most important strategic partnership of India at the moment. I cannot think of any other country, including the European Union, that could challenge that emerging partnership. Uh, I would look around at the world map and say no. At the moment, it is the India-US connect, which for both sides is the most important. But policy parameters change, if situations change, if that happens, then we would look at other options naturally.
Any other question?
And then, and Gannon Markeship, how do you see the role of China now? Like India and US have to remove president earlier. How would China respond to this?
China has responded many, many times with anger, with frustration, uh, with occasional effort at a sweetener. Uh, but then, Xi Jinping is not very good at giving sweeteners, I think. Uh, the Chinese are naturally upset because if the United States stands solidly behind India in a potential conflict situation with China, let's not fool ourselves. We are not asking the American army to come and fight our war with us. We know that just as we were the lonely sentinel in 1962, we are the lonely sentinel today. No country is going to fight our war with us. But at that particular point of time and in the period leading up to it, if we have the critical technologies in place, if we are fully prepared, given that we have excellent patriotic armed forces who have demonstrated time and again that even when we didn't have cutting edge technologies, we still were able to protect ourselves, it ensures that A, we are safe in our frontiers, and B, it conveys the correct message to China that don't try and think that the India of 62 can be replicated in 2023. And I will share with you something which my late father told me. In 1960, my father was told by the then Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru to set up an organization which is now called BRO, which was called Border Roads Development Organization. He was the first secretary. And he set it up with the first Director General Border Roads, General Kartar Dubey, to build those border roads. Because the Prime Minister at that time anticipated that there could be problem. It is a matter which of great sorrow for me that those roads that were built by the Border Roads Organization, without help, without external technology, entirely by us, through grit, including the road leading to the Jozila Pass, the Rotang Pass, etc. Those roads which we built were used by the Chinese to capture our territory. Today, in retrospect, if those roads had not been built, if my father had not, with General Kartar Dubey, worked day and night for 1.5 years to build those roads at 14,000 feet, 15,000 feet, roads which could take, as my father used to tell me, those huge armored trucks, tanks, roads that can take tanks for the first time. They were used by the Chinese to capture our territory. We still have not got it back. That is why I say, from my own experience, with the family background I come from, that India of 1962 is gone forever. This is the India of 2023. We use our own predator drones. We understand artificial intelligence. We know how the next war will be fought. We understand cyber attacks. And we've got professional soldiers, unlike the People's Liberation Army. They are all volunteers and they have not fought wars. Ours is a professional army, professional armed forces, and we have beefed up the infrastructure on our side of the border. That conflict will surely come one day. But when that conflict comes, we are prepared and we will face it. And if we have a great power behind us, supporting us, ensuring we have the supplies that we need, which we may need at that time, that is a great moral booster for all of us. Next question, please.
A little louder. It will be easy.
You want?
Yeah.
How does India sees the comment of Barack Obama to CNN about the rights of Muslim and all? How do India sees this part, and also about the border part? Like, how long can it take for India to take back its territory from China? So,
As far as the first question is concerned, I don't know how India sees it, but I'll tell you how I see it. I see it as an irrelevant remark coming from a man whose sun has already set. What do we say in India? Do we worship the setting sun? Do we worship the sun that has already set? We don't, right? His remark is irrelevant. It's in very poor taste because the President of the United States belongs to the same party as his and was his Vice President. And it also reflects very poorly on his knowledge of his own history, because it was in his time that he ordered attacks on so many Muslim countries, 6 Muslim countries, including Libya and Syria. So, but I think the greatest humiliation was what the White House spokesperson said yesterday, saying that he is a private citizen and that his remarks are in a private context. So I would not waste any time on that. Your second question was on will we ever get what we. It's a difficult question to answer, I tell you, because I think it will be difficult to get back Akshay Chin. We lost Akshay Chin, as I said, because of some blunders that were made by the Indian leadership of the time. I don't know whether we'll get back Akshay Chin. But we will certainly ensure that not 1 kilometer of Indian territory is lost to the Chinese. And we've made sure of that. This Prime Minister has made sure of that in his 2 terms. That's all that I can say for the moment. Getting back Akshay Chin. And why did they want Akshay Chin? It's full of resources. Please don't forget that India is a very large country, but very poor in resources, mineral resources. Poor in oil, poor in resources. This was a part of our country that was rich in resources. Will we get it back? It will be easier for me to predict whether we get back POK. He's an expert on that, so I won't even go into that. But
Floor is yours today.
but it would be probably easier for us to get back POK than to get back Akshay Chin. Next question, please.
Myself Bashish Yadvanshi from Faculty of Law. My question is, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Of course. My question is that does U.S.-India new developing relationship impact Indo-Russian relationship, and how do you say that as Russia has been an important strategic partner to India?
I would answer your question with a counter question. How does the Putin Xi Jinping cozy partnership impact the Indo-Russian relationship? They started it, you know. When you take a mistress into your house, it affects your marriage, right? So who took the mistress first? It was not India, right? What did the Russians do? before Ukraine conflict. They were cozying up to the Chinese. They were also cozying up to the Pakistanis. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think I am, the day the conflict, Russia-Ukraine conflict broke out, that incredibly foolish former Pakistani Prime Minister, the former cricketer, I think he should have stuck to cricket and not politics, he was in Moscow. He was in Moscow meeting Putin the day that the Ukraine conflict broke out. So, my answer is that if Russia believes that its core national security interests are better served by cozying up to Xi Jinping, our answer is we greatly value the Russian friendship. We can never be grateful enough for what they've done for us in the past. We have tried to reduce our dependence on them as a defense partner because of huge difficulties that we have faced, because many of the spare parts used to come from joint Ukraine-Russia production in Ukraine. Therefore, we recognize the fact that we need to reduce our dependence on Russian military hardware. But we are always there for the Russians, they know it. But they know what they have to do to come closer to us, which is to stop embracing Xi Jinping in this manner, to understand that Russia is a great power, its strategic interests are better served by having India as its strategic partner than China. And let me add, since you asked me this question, that it's not as cozy as it looks from the top, because those wide open spaces between the Russia-Chinese border, empty of white Russians, have always been eyed by the Chinese as a nice place to park their surplus population. And in every strategic-minded Russian's mind, there is always that uneasy fear, which is why it's really a partnership of convenience and not of real friendship like they have with India. They are always apprehensive about those empty territories waiting to be peopled, but not by white Russians, but by the Han Chinese. So it's not such an easy and sweet and lovely friendship as people from outside who are naive, who don't know what's happening inside, understand. Okay?
So just one sentence, ma'am, with your permission. I think we have more or less officially dehyphenated the two relationship. The friendship with Russia more or less remains even when we deepen the United States relationship. So that's why, that's the basic understanding. But ma'am would know better about the intricacies. In general, if you look at
Well, I
domain-
don't like the word dehyphenated or hyphenated, because for a long time we were the victim of hyphenation with Pakistan as far as the West is concerned. So
Now they have
I try
dehyphenated
to
that
avoid
also.
the word dehyphenated, but I agree with your assessment. No, it's not that we have dehyphenated as such. We have been able to establish, based on core national interests, a relationship with Russia which makes it clear that while we do not appreciate their increasing closeness with the Chinese, whom they have had no difficulty in pronouncing as their best friend, their closest ally. And in fact, the day this famous so-called failed coup happened, the Russian foreign minister was sent to Beijing to explain what was happening, I presume. There was no official note which came out of that visit. We have demonstrated to the Russians that it's a historical relationship, it's a very old partnership. We have never supported unilateral sanctions. We have made arrangements so that, in a way, Russia too has benefited from India buying its oil and refining it here, because in a way, it has also ensured that Russia does not become bankrupt. So I think whether it's the West that benefited from Russian refined oil, which we have sold back to the West without violating the sanctions, or it's Russia who sold us their oil, which we can refine in our refineries, on both sides, we came to understandings worthy of the country of Chanakya. It was smart, savvy, and it was required to be done in order to ensure that India does not, the Indian economy does not suffer because of the unilateral sanctions. Do we have time for more questions?
Sure.
Or?
So,
Yeah.
ma'am, we have a very senior banker here. His name is Mr. Shomendu Bhattacharya. He's a senior vice president with one of, I won't name the bank, but he's with one of the top banks of India. So, Mr. Bhattacharya.
I have a very simple query, ma'am.
Okay.
Going forward, do you envisage Indian landmass being used as an American base to prevent the Chinese aggression militarily and to control the Indo-Pacific water area? Will India, going forward, today, because what Pathikrit said on the forefront, defense is somewhere, I think there is some collaboration on defense side increases the apprehension of using Indian soil as an American base. And we have seen what happens when Americans use a base to prevent China militarily growing. So, ma'am, is there an apprehension there on this point?
Actually, coming from a banker, that's a very left-wing question. But then, of course, you're a Bengali like me, so that's okay. We've all grew up with left-wing ideologies and then moved to the right. No, there is no such apprehension for a very simple reason. Bases are used by great powers in territories of weak states, states that cannot protect their sovereignty, that fear aggression. Then the base is used to prop up their sovereignty and also to further the strategic priorities of the great power. Ask yourself the question, are we a weak state? No. Are we capable of defending ourselves against the Chinese? Yes. Do we have any expectation that the American Marines or the Army will come and help us? No. Why do we know that even more categorically? Because Americans hate body bags. Americans hate putting boots on the ground. That is why in the past you had shock and awe in Iraq, etc. You saw the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, which gave the entirely wrong signals, including to China, that A, boots on the ground is not a popular American strategy, body bags is not something Americans can live with, etc. Under those circumstances, would it be, you ask yourself as an Indian, would it be remotely possible for any Indian political party, regardless of what their ideology is, to ever allow any part of India to be used as a foreign base? My answer to your question is a categorical no, never. Never. No Indian Prime Minister, no Indian Parliament would allow it.
Right. Any other question?
There's somebody behind. Give him the mic.
Ma'am, I'm Nagesh from Faculty of Law, Delhi University. So, ma'am, my question is that now India is emerging as a largest population country, and yes, we are, ma'am. And AI is now evolving technology, and we know that most of the tech giant, big tech giant, is dominated by USA. So, how India ensure data protection of its citizens, and how ensure data protection?
We we are working towards it. In fact, the issue of data protection is one of the issues that has held up the India-EU FTA, the India-UK FTA. We are working towards legislation that would be acceptable to our Western partners on this matter. It's not really strictly linked to the subject matter of the visit, but I'm fully aware of this because I have negotiated unsuccessfully, unfortunately, when I was Joint Secretary Europe West, an India-EU FTA, and one of the issues was data protection then, one of the issues is now, but we are working towards finding a solution to it. Any other questions, please? Someone who has not asked any question?
Anybody?
There are two ladies here, keeping quiet. Anybody here? You don't have any questions? You wanted to ask a second question? Yes. Yeah, yeah.
You have to be a little louder so that everyone can hear.
Put the mic.
I just want to ask regarding the permanent membership of India in United Nation General Assembly.
Security Council.
Sorry, Security Council. Sorry. Does this visit or whatever will help India to become that permanent member?
First of all, I would suggest you read the UN Charter and the rules of procedure of the UN General Assembly and Security Council. There it is clearly given that a country can become permanent member of the Security Council provided no P5 country vetoes it and that the resolution is simultaneously adopted in the UN General Assembly with 2/3 of countries present and voting. As far as the second condition is concerned, in the General Assembly, there will be no problem. As far as the Security Council is concerned, all P5 countries except China support India's permanent membership. Therefore, unless China changes its position, we can never become a permanent member of the Security Council. It has nothing to do with the United States. United States, France, United Kingdom, and the Russian Federation have already in the past 5 to 6 years publicly endorsed India's candidature to the Security Council. So you should reflect again on the irony of history that when we were offered the vacant seat of China in the Security Council, no, we refused it saying it is not gentlemanly behavior. So I can tell you that when I joined Foreign Service, the first thing my boss told me was, in foreign policy, there's no such thing as behaving like a gentleman or a lady. The only thing that matters in foreign policy is core national interests. That's it. Nothing else. If in the process of achieving your core national interests, you don't behave like a gentleman or lady, that's too bad. Then you tell your adversary that you belong to the land of Chanakya. That's it.
So, ma'am, if you just ask me, I mean, if you permit me to ask a question, like, is it also not true in certain way that it has already become a little redundant whether we have the presidency, member of the P5 or not, because of G20 or other such forums where we are getting considerable amount of importance, and that the fact that we are a nuclear power. It's important, but even if it's not coming, it's okay. I mean, we would strive for it, but it doesn't stop anything on our hand.
I'm not sure I quite agree with you because if you look at the UN Security Council and the UN Charter, what does the UN Security Council do? What are the powers it has? Under the UN Charter, it can invade another country. It has the power to order the invasion of a country. Under the power of the Charter, it can block, and it has successfully blocked, China has successfully blocked efforts to name Pakistani terrorists as international terrorists, right? So the point here is, I want to take you back into history. You look at the permanent members of the Security Council, they represent the victorious powers of World War II. Many of those powers, with the exception of the United States, are now mediocre, middle-level powers. If you look at the geographical composition of the permanent membership of the Security Council, it is ludicrous that India is not there, that Japan is not there, that Germany is not there, that it doesn't have a single black country, it doesn't have a single Arab country, it doesn't have a single Latin American country. Then some of these powers say, we can perhaps admit you as a semi-permanent member. Oh ho, what is that? Semi-permanent member means it's like, as Bishop Desmond Tutu said once famously when they were negotiating apartheid, I don't want a crumb from the white man's table, I want the whole loaf of bread, right? So here, what is the second category in between? You're neither permanent nor are you unpermanent. You are, what are you? You will be given, let's say, 20-year membership, but with no veto. So no veto means you are at the doorstep with one foot inside and one foot outside. Why should India accept it? Why should India accept that its former colonizer, whose GDP is below us, is a permanent member with a veto, and we are there without a veto. Now the question is, does the G20 or the BRICS or the Quad, does it compensate? It not only compensates, it demonstrates to the permanent members of the Security Council, if they want to hear, I don't know if they want to hear, that because the Security Council does not represent the actual power equations of the world, as is normal in international relations, new power equations are coming up to balance it out. But if you ask me, can I say the Quad is as important as the Security Council? No. Is the G20 as important as the Security Council? Perhaps, because it's a new economic grouping. It's very important. But I would have a lot of doubt in pronouncing in a definitive way that if any of these new groupings are as important. And secondly, why should we give up? We must become a permanent member of the Security Council. It is our due as a great power. We must get in. So we should not give up by comforting ourselves, it doesn't really matter. We've got this and we've got that. No, 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 no. We will not rest until that whole loaf of the white man's bread is shared with us on an equal basis with the veto. That's my
Ma'am, we know,
position.
China will always veto. Is there any procedure we could bypass China's veto
No.
power?
It's written in the charter.
So means we have to convince the China in order to get into this.
Exactly. And more than India actually, the Chinese have a huge problem with Japan.
Yes.
And in our effort to become permanent member, we are allied with 4 countries: Japan, China, Germany, India, right? The Chinese have informed us many times that even if ever they agree to India, they can never agree to Japan, because never can China forget Japan's occupation of China, its wartime atrocities, etc. It's a whole history leading up to World War II, which China has not come to terms with. Therefore, I don't know whether it was such a great idea to team up with other countries. Maybe it seemed good at that time, but definitely, as long as we are allied with the Japanese on this one, never ever will the Chinese relent. That is my assessment.
One last question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like to take
Actually,
the
we have
mic?
strayed very far away from the topic, I realize. But anyway, no problem.
That's how, ma'am, interaction questions happen, because they are young people.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes,
Myself Rishavanand from faculty.
Please introduce yourself.
hold the mic closer. Yeah.
Myself Rishavanand from Faculty of Law, Delhi University. Ma'am, my question is: as India is has global power aspiration, and India's intention is to become from a brown water navy to blue water navy, and what are the challenges India is going to face from revisionist power like China in Indo-Pacific region, and in what sense US can support us uh, to fulfill our national interest in terms of Indo-Pacific region?
Well, you got 3 or 4 questions rolled into one. Let me try and answer them.
Just the mic first.
Let me try and answer them as quickly as possible. We already have a blue water strategy. That changed actually quite some time back. Um the reason why we joined Quad enthusiastically is precisely because we felt the need of other great powers with great navies to help us um, look after our strategic interests in the Indian Ocean, because we have far flung islands which could get occupied by mercenaries, by others. They would form very useful bases for hostile powers, etc. That is not going to happen, because our Indian Navy has completely changed itself, and we are doing joint patrolling with our allies in the Indian Ocean and in the Indo-Pacific, and with Western navies. So that is not going to happen. The United States has also formed a military grouping to ensure the safety of the Indo-Pacific and the South China Sea, which is called AUKUS. That brings the Royal Navy into the Indian Ocean. We're not that enthusiastic about the Royal Navy, but there is no doubt that Britain is a great naval power, was a great naval power, and will help to fill the gap until the Australian Navy gets strengthened, because Australia for a long time had an inward-looking defense policy and was very closely linked to China for economic interests. Now that Australia has changed its path and has understood that its priorities lie with India and not with China, it's going to take a little bit of time for the Australian Navy to modernize itself, and maybe the Royal Navy can fill the gap. If you talk about what are our strategic priorities, our strategic priorities are to ensure our strategic assets in the Indian Ocean are safe. That does not necessarily include Taiwan. Let's be very clear on that. We have never publicly stated that we are committed to Taiwan's defense. Okay? But we are committed to a free, rule-based order in the Indo-Pacific and to the safety of our far-flung islands in the Indian Ocean. That is all that I am prepared to go at this moment. When people ask me about Taiwan, I say we have never publicly stated that we're going to come to Taiwan's defense. We have enough challenges of our own on our border. Let's face it, the Chinese have never recognized Arunachal Pradesh. Till today, they call it Eastern Tibet. When people from Arunachal Pradesh seek Chinese visas, they are denied the visa, or it is stapled on their passport. Why? Because they do not accept Arunachal Pradesh. That is very serious consequences for us. So at this point of time, our core national interest, as I said earlier, is in defending our territorial integrity, whether it's our far-flung islands or our own territories, given that we are not allied militarily, we're not a member of NATO, we're not a partner country of NATO. We don't have United States and India having signed an agreement that United States will come to our defense if we are attacked by China. The manner in which NATO countries, under their charter, are obliged to come to each other's defense if they are attacked. Mind you, that comes with riders which we don't know about. Like, for instance, I went to a brainstorming recently in JNU with some Baltic countries who told me that they don't feel safe even though they are NATO members. So I asked them, but that's strange. I said, according to the NATO charter, NATO is bound to come to your defense. So they said that NATO says, we are not sure whether we can come immediately to your defense, but be sure that in 4 or 5 years we will certainly liberate you. Now, I don't know whether you would feel comfortable if you were in that country's shoes. I wouldn't feel comfortable. I would much rather do what we've done, which is shore up our defenses, get the necessary critical technologies, and be prepared for that conflict, which will definitely come one day, sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We had a wonderful session, and would request everyone to kindly applaud ma'am for this great session. And we would look forward to many such interactions with her. It's not generally, we generally don't get every day such a known, such a well, read and an esteemed IFS officer to come and speak here. Before we end this session, we would request the ladies here to give a small memento to ma'am and honor her on behalf of the foundation.
The greatest memento which the ladies could have done is to
one,
ask me some difficult questions.
Top one.
Please do that next time when I come.
Top one. And one of those. Give this one. Yeah. There's a high tea arrangement outside after
Thank you
this
so much,
event.
my dear. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. I'm going to give this to the Habitat Library. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have to run.
Yes, ma'am, from this side.
So we'll go from.
Easier this way.
Why don't you give him also one of these?
No, this is for ours only.
It's yours only. Okay.
So we'll carry this if you want to the.
No, I'm going to gift it to the Habitat London. Sandeep will take it. ठीक था?